Kelley is running from her bedroom. She hits the wall, she breaks the wall, and she ends up in the kitchen. Charlie's in her room when all this happens. She hears the whole thing go down. Do you remember seeing a person in the house? Yes. There was a robber, and he hurt my mom. Was he about my height? And Charlie says, he was the same height as my dad. How big was he? He's about the same size as my dad. Okay, well, did you see his face? Well, no, he was wearing a mask, but I saw his eyes. They look like my daddy's. Then she's going to say something really interesting. They say, did you ever hear him speak? And she thinks for a minute. And Charlie says,
when suburban mother Kelley Clayton was found murdered in her home, residents in her small upstate New York town were shocked. She seemed to have the perfect life, but investigators soon found that things were not as they appeared.
Welcome to Socialite Crime Club. I would like to ask you a question about the Cellular Analysis and Survey Team, also known as the FBI CAST team. Have you ever seen a case where they may have dropped the ball on something?
Yes, it's not often. They are really good at what they do, but there are a select few that do let their ego get in the way at times.
And what happens when ego gets the best of a proper investigation?
Well, it's hard to say. I can only talk about the cases I'm familiar with, but hopefully there's somebody there to clean up the mess. All right, for this case, we're going to go back to 2016, December of 2016, and I've got to jump around a little bit on this case. I'm going to try to really explain the story the best I can chronologically, but to really do it justice, I am going to have to kind of jump our timeline back and forth, so please, everybody, be patient with us. The other thing I want to say up front with this episode, very visual. If you're listening to this in your car, you're probably going to want to rewatch it on YouTube. We have a lot of visual aids for this case. I did a lot of testimony, and I used a lot of visual aids for the jury, and I'm going to show the majority of those during today's episode. So it should be really interesting for our viewers to kind of get a firsthand account of this one. So back to our timeline, December 26, 2016, we were busy.
Yes.
This is when ZedX, our company, had really started to take off the later end of 2016, first part of 2017. Of course, December 26th, day after Christmas, as I usually am, I'm fat, dumb, and happy sitting at home enjoying a day off. And I got this random call from a New York State police detective, Detective Reagan, who I later become familiar with as Allie. And Allie is explaining, hey, we've got this really high profile case where a husband hires this hitman that used to work for him to kill his wife. We've got trial coming up. We're really struggling with the phone stuff. We've been looking for an expert. Several people recommended you. What do we need to do to get you involved with this case? And I'm asking a handful of questions. And at first I'm like, yeah, I can take a look at it. No problem. But usually when I get towards the end of these conversations, I ask the really important question, what is our timeline? Have you made discovery? When do you have trial scheduled? And most of the times when I get these phone calls, there's not even a date for a trial set.
It's months out.
If not years. Right. So I ask her, I'm like, okay, well, when is the trial, or is there a trial date set? And she says, oh no, we have a trial date, January 9th. And I'm like, January 9th of 2018? She's like, no, January 9th of 2017, 14 days from now. And I'm like, yeah, never going to happen. There's no way I can do this case in 14 days.
I do want to say that we did have a handful of other cases that they would call really, really close to trial, and they would usually get a denial because it's just too close to trial. And we were busy with 40-hour classes and actually other testimonies somewhere else that there was no way you could have done anything to help them with their case. They were just too late to the game.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough time to prep for the case, you're the one that eats it on the stand. And as we've talked with prior episodes, that haunts you for the rest of your life. So if I can't properly prepare, I don't want to be involved with the case.
Especially if you have a prosecutor who is not prepared to really get involved with what it takes to give a cross and redirect with what you guide them to do on the records.
So yeah, I pretty much hung up on her. I did it nicely, but I was like, there's no way this is happening. Well, she calls back the next day. And this time she gets our admin, Keri Montano. For those of you who do not know Keri Montano, which is probably most of our listeners, she was really the heart and soul of ZedX. She was our admin, but she ran the operation in the background.
She knew everything about everybody. All of our customers adored her. They still do. Our team adored her. She was the glue that held everything together because she was constantly in communication with everybody. Best admin in the entire world.
You couldn't get better. Yeah, Keri saved my ass on so many occasions I can't even count. She talks to Keri this time. I'm not aware of this conversation. Keri hangs up with Allie and immediately calls me and says, hey, did you know about this case in New York? I just talked, and I'm like, stop. I talked to her yesterday. I do not have time for this. We're not taking that case. And she's like, oh no, you're taking that case. I just cleared your calendar. So my admin basically put me on notice that I will be taking this case. And I'm thinking, oh shit, what have you got me into?
Now, granted, she was really good for us because she was far more empathetic than either of us ever were. So she has this heart of gold and she loves to help people. And when she gets to know them and they get to know her, they get in kind of tight. So it was unquestionable that Cy would be taking this case at that point because I think she had probably planned a vacation or something to go see Allie after they talked a while.
Probably.
But it was really good that we ended up taking the case.
Well, and when I get calls like this, I should clarify because it's really important for this case. I don't want details of your investigation. I want to know what type of evidence you have. I want to be able to look at that evidence. And then once I look at what I have on the phone stuff, typically, I'll go back and start to see the details. But if you look at the whole investigation up front, it pigeonholes you on what you try to see in the phone records. If you don't know anything, it forces you to look at all the records. And you're going to hear me say that over and over again today. You have to look at all the records. The difference was when Allie called me, I don't want any details. So I stopped her. I'm like, no, I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that. Just the facts, ma'am. Well, when she called Keri, Keri wants to know everything. So now Keri's like, you don't understand the kids and the wife and this and that. Long story short, Allie sold Keri on the bleeding heart on you guys have to come do this case. We are in a very tight spot. Long story short, I end up taking this case. And I just wanted to clarify that because this is not normal. And I don't want other people calling me in the future being like, well, you did it on that case. This is a 1 in 100. Like, I'm not going to do this very often.
Well, you also had a great prosecutor to work with.
We did. Whedon Wetmore. And we'll talk more about Whedon later on.
Yeah.
But yes, amazing. Well, and Susan. Whedon and Susan, just an amazing prosecutorial team. So some challenges at the time. I needed to ensure right off the bat, okay, where are you guys at Discovery? Do you have everything out there? Because we're running late. I could potentially get my work product in if my work product is based on evidence that's already been disclosed. The issue we get is I see something and I realize they're missing it and they've never discovered it. We're too close to trial. We're probably going to lose it. So I jump on the discovery piece and we're good. All the discovery's been made. We're in solid record there. The next thing is, hey, send me everything you have. Anything with geolocation. If it gives some type of location data, I want to see it. And it's a lot in this case. We'll get to it in a little bit. So they send that over. I map it out. I get a general idea of the movements. My methodology, and I just explained this a little bit, map everything, look at everything, come up with some basic theories, and then go back and start gathering facts to see, are those theories accurate? Can we corroborate it through different things? Like, what's going on here? The other thing I noticed is there's no drive test. Now, this crime happens in September of 2015. So we're in December of 2016, a year and 4 months, 5 months? Mm-hmm. Nobody ever did a drive test. And there's some things with this case that the drive test is really critical. So that was the next piece is I had to jump on a plane, immediately fly out there. In the first week of January, I'm doing drive tests.
Was there anyone working the phone records in this case at all?
Yes, there was. New York State Police and the FBI casting.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Now, I knew we probably won't be able to get this drive test admitted because it's too close to trial. The state failed to meet discovery there. They're doing evidence at the last minute. It's going to be really hard to get the drive test data in. At this point, that's not my concern. I want to check all the boxes. So I'm going to do it anyway. And it was a pain in the ass. Like I had to fly all the way from Arizona to New York. I spent, I think, 3 days out there.
We flew.
We did. You drove the drive test for me. So we do the drive test. And when I'm doing the drive test, it's the first time I get to meet with some of the investigators. And I want to make a few things really clear here. The investigators working this case were awesome. I'm going to talk some smack about some other people, but I want to make sure I'm defining who I'm talking about. The New York State Police detectives that were on this case, great men and women. They did an absolutely phenomenal job.
And they were a lot of fun to work with.
They were a blast to work with.
They treated us so well when we went out there.
Yes, great.
Everybody was
great people.
Awesome, yeah.
But I get my first little eyebrow. When I say something stupid, you do that eyebrow thing that you do where you raise one. Yeah, right there. There it is. Yeah, that's how I know I'm crossing the line. I had that moment when I got out there and one of the detectives was explaining, okay, this is going to sound a little weird. Let me give a little bit of geographically where we're at. We're on the south side of the Finger Lakes of New York State. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this, think about like Rochester, Buffalo, go south to the lower part of the state. There's 3 long, skinny lakes. It almost looks like somebody scratched the map with their fingernails right there with these lakes. Mm-hmm. We're at the bottom of those lakes, just south of those lakes. Now we're in Corning, and some people might recognize the name Corning glassware. This is where all of the Corning glassware is made. So Corning is a little town there, and Corning Glass has their big factory there. Now Corning, which is very close to where this crime is going to occur, is in Steuben County. All right. Now, just a little bit to the east is Elmira. We may have people who live in Elmira listen to this, so I want to be nice, but Elmira and Corning are not the same. Corning's pretty nice. Elmira's a little rough around the edges.
It's a little on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, a little bit. Now, Elmira is in Chemung County. So the crime happens in Steuben County, but when I get out there, the prosecutor is from Chemung County. And I thought, that's interesting. Why is the Chemung district attorney taking the Steuben County case? Well, there were some issues with the other district attorney in Steuben County, and he had to conflict himself off of this case. We'll get to that later, but that's my first little red flag eyebrow of that is not normal. It happens,
right?
But it's not normal, and that kind of concerns me. At the time, I was just told, well, it's a really small town. Everybody knows everybody.
We've seen that in a lot of places.
Yeah. Wink, wink, nod, nod by nose. All right, let's talk about the victims in this case, or at least the main primary victim is going to be Kelley. Her maiden name is Stage. Her married name is going to be Clayton. So Kelley Clayton.
She's cute.
Of her. Yeah, this is a picture of Kelley and Tom. Kelley is a local kid. She grew up there. She was a very good student, honor roll student. She played softball. She was a cheerleader. She is a hometown girl in that area.
I could see that. She's like the girl next door.
Yeah, 100%. She meets Tom around 2003, 2004. And Tom's a hockey player. He played hockey in college. He ends up playing for the Elmira Jackals. So he's a semi-pro, or I guess it's technically a pro hockey player. He's never going to make the NHL, but he plays for the Elmira Jackals.
Does he do anything else besides
he's total shithead. So he's a shithead and he plays hockey.
I meant as work. Does he do anything else for work?
I think he just plays hockey at this time.
Oh, okay. At this time, okay.
Kelley sees him at a hockey game playing, and she's like, ooh, I really like that guy. Later on, her and her friend are in a bar downtown after a game. He happens to be in the bar. Her friend actually comes up and is like, hey, are you single? And he's like, why are you asking? And she explains, well, hey, the blonde. And he's like, ooh, I'm into her.
Yeah.
Like, she's really sexy. Like, yes, I would love to meet her. And one thing leads to another. They begin dating. 2006, they're going to get married. Tom, I'm not going to talk much about his background because I don't care because he's a piece of shit. So let's just put it this way. He was a hockey player. He's a shithead. And later, like, I want to say 2006-ish, around the time they get married, he gets hurt. He gets some type of injury. His hockey career is over. And he starts to get into Serve Pro.
What's that?
The cleanup company.
Oh, yes. They drive the little vans around.
Yeah. So he's like an admin at the Serve Pro in Elmira. And then he also has some rental properties. So he's doing well, though. He's making good money.
Okay.
And he buys a home in Caton, Caton. Now, Caton is just south of Corning. They buy a house. They have a couple kids. In fact, I've got a picture here.
It's like a foresty area almost. It's very wooded.
Yes. I've got a picture here of Kelley and their 2 kids. So they have a daughter first. Her name is Charlie. And then they have a son. His name is Colin. Now, when this incident is going to happen, Charlie, the daughter, is 7. I believe Colin, the boy, is going to be 3-ish.
Oh my gosh.
Around 3. So yeah, here's a picture of Kelley and the kids.
That's so cute.
Right?
Yeah.
911 call. Let's get to the crime. September 29th, 2015. It's going to be around 0050 hours. So 12:50 in the morning. And I couldn't remember if it was at 12:47 or 12:53, but it's right in that time frame. Frantic. Absolutely frantic 911 call. And it's Tom. It's Tom Clayton saying he came home from a poker game to find his wife beat to death in the kitchen. And he's completely just frantic. And at one point, the dispatcher's even saying, "Can you perform CPR?" And he's like, "No, there's no way." And the dispatcher's like, "Well, how do you know?" And he says, "Just trust me."
Oh, that's...
red flag, don't trust me.
Yeah, just trust me. Get out of here with that.
So sheriff's deputies are going to respond. They are going to find Kelley. And you can always tell a really horrific scene. There's body cam footage. Anybody can Google this and actually watch. Dateline did a piece of this, the Cabin in the Woods. 2020 did a piece on this. I think it was The Man Behind the Mask. And we're going to show a little bit of footage from The Man Behind the Mask. They have body cam from Officer Swan. He was the first officer on scene. And he walks into the kitchen. Mm-hmm. His only response is, oh. And then he turns around and walks out. Mm. I want to paint this scene because it's really important for people to understand the violence that happened in this case. She has been beaten to death with what we now know is a yellow fiberglass axe handle. So the axe head is not there. It's just that handle. Mm-hmm. So if you think about an axe, take off the handle, somebody beat her to death with that fiberglass handle. They beat her so hard with that it actually chipped the end of the handle off. And those fiberglass handles are pretty strong. That's why they use fiberglass instead of wood.
Oh my gosh.
But she is beaten severely. When they go through the house, it didn't all happen in the kitchen. They can see where this starts in the upstairs bedroom, in her bedroom. Mm-hmm. Goes down the stairs. There's blood along the way. There's a hole in the wall where somebody hits the wall, most likely Kelley. She gets to the bottom of the stairs, but there's a little blood trail that goes the whole way where she's attacked in her bedroom, runs, goes down the stairs, ends up in the kitchen, and ultimately is killed in the kitchen by being beaten to death. So it's a horrific scene. The kids are home. So Charlie and Cullen are both home in their beds when this happens, and we'll get into some of this later on. We're going to learn more about this as we go. The Deputy Swan, the next thing he says is, "So Tom, where were you when this happens?" And Tom explains, "I was playing poker." Mm-hmm. I've got to explain the poker game a little bit because this is going to become really important later on.
Was he at like a casino?
No, there is a family in Corning, the Millers. And we'll talk a lot about the Millers before this episode is over. Every Monday night, the Millers host this local poker game down in their basement. And they've got this room set up. And it's actually kind of a cool little room set up with an actual poker table. Mm-hmm. Mr. Miller's the bank. And they eat dinner, they drink beer, and they play poker. And it's like a regular thing that on Mondays, they have this little poker game. Okay. Tom is part of this group that plays poker on a regular basis. Him playing poker at the Millers on a Monday night, not abnormal at all. In fact, he even has a nickname.
What?
Hockey Puck. What a dumb nickname.
Yeah, that is dumb.
So that's going to be Tom's alibi, is I was playing poker. I got done with the poker game. I came home and I found my wife like this. There's some really critical things that are going to come up with Charlie, the 7-year-old daughter. Charlie sees her mom. She goes down in the kitchen, finds her mom like that. She knows that this beating is happening. She actually has some blood on her where it looks like she probably either hugged or maybe touched her mom after she was killed. And then she's later going to state that she knew she needed to go upstairs and take care of her 3-year-old brother. So she goes upstairs and is taking care of her brother by the time Thomas comes home. But I want people to know about Charlie and Cullen. It's really, really important because there's crimes and then there's unforgivable crimes. And we're going to get to that as we go through this. Yeah. Tom's got a solid alibi here. All right. He's going to talk about this poker game, the Millers. First thing law enforcement does in this investigation, let's go to the Millers. So they knock on the door, and it's kind of funny. Mr. Miller says one of the best quotes that I've heard in a long time. "When the cops knock on your door at 6 a.m., it's not good." And he's right.
There's so much truth in that.
Yeah, no, they never knock on your door at 6 a.m. for a good reason. So when he answers the door, they explain, "Hey, we understand that you host a regular poker game on Monday nights." "Yes, I do." "Did you have that game last night?" "Yes, I did." Mm-hmm. "Was Tom Clayton here?" "Yes, he was. He stayed here and he played poker." "Well, what time did the game get over?" "Around midnight, just after midnight." "And did Tom stay until the end?" "Oh yeah, he left here probably just after midnight." So strong alibi. "Okay, well, was it just you and your wife?" "Oh, no. We have like 7 other players. All 7 of these players are going to vouch, oh no, Tom was here until midnight." So very strong alibi. Now we also are going to get timing data on Tom's phone. This is where I'm going to jump around a little bit chronologically just to keep our viewers really caught up here. When the timing data is looked at, sure enough, Tom is at the Miller's house during the time of the poker game. Right after midnight, around 12:10, You see his phone leave their house, their neighborhood, drive out, and it's probably about a 20-minute drive to Clayton, to his house. He's going to arrive at his house right around 12:40, 12:42 maybe. The 911 call is within 10 minutes. There is no way this crime was committed in that gap of time.
Right.
It doesn't match what Charlie is saying. It just doesn't match the evidence, and the idea that he could commit this crime, change clothes, hide evidence, and then have law enforcement on scene later not see any of that is just, it's never going to happen.
So for all intents and purposes, they can rule him out.
I can tell you when I reviewed the phone records and some of the details on this case, and I will still say it today, Tom Clayton did not kill Kelley Clayton. No way. He just did not do it. All right. So we know he didn't kill her. However, that morning, they're going to interview Charlie because she's the best eyewitness they have, right?
Yeah.
At this point. So they take her down to the police department. I've got to explain a little bit for our socialites here. Children are very difficult to interview, especially children under the age of 8. There is special training and special classes and special interviews that have to be conducted to do this. I've seen her interview.
Not so strong.
I don't want to be critical. I can understand why they did it the way they did. And I can also understand the importance of trying to get this interview done. If you don't do it right, it can be actually more traumatic to the child to relive this in a certain way.
And possibly damning in court as well.
Yeah, like never be used type
Right.
damning. But there's this thing called play therapy, and it's actually really been developed. It's done by psychologists, and it's over a period of time that you can actually elicit these different statements or different memories from children. It's much more reliable. It's much easier on the child. In this case, they're going to put her in a regular interview room. It's a nicer interview room, but she's in an interview room. She's got the police chief himself. And then you've got this lady who's doing the interview, but you've got 2 adults who she doesn't know.
When you say this lady doing the interview,
I don't know if she's somebody within their counseling side or some type of a child psychologist. I don't know who she is.
Right, which is not the same thing as actually putting her with a psychologist in a very special place.
This needs to happen over days, not 12 hours after the incident, right? So they're going to start talking to her, and this interview is going to be a perfect example as to why you don't do this. As they're going through, do you remember seeing a person in the house? Yes. There was a robber, and he hurt my mom. Okay, well, how tall is the robber? And the police chief, he's trying to do a good job. He's asking very open-ended questions. Was he taller than me? Was he shorter than me? Was he about my height? And Charlie says, he was the same height as my dad. Okay, well, how big was he? Was he skinny? Was he fat like me? The police chief, because he's a little chubby.
Right.
Was he skinnier than me? Like, how big was he? He's about the same size as my dad. Okay, well, did you see his face? Well, no, he was wearing a mask, but I saw his eyes. Well, what does his eyes look like? They look like my daddy's. So height, weight, eyes, she just keeps saying, looks like my daddy. And then unsolicited question, she just comes out, oh, and the mask he was wearing and the jeans that he was wearing, they're just like my dad's. My dad wears a mask like that when he goes deer hunting and it's cold. It's like a ski mask.
Oh.
So she's dropping some bombs here unintentionally. And of course, they're thinking, wow, what's happening there? Then she's going to say something really interesting.
Okay.
They say, did you ever hear him speak? And she thinks for a minute and then she says, well, no. But if it was my dad, he wouldn't have spoke because he knew we would recognize his voice. So
how does she think that? That's crazy at that age.
Right? Just what she's thinking. But then she cleans this up.
Okay.
It couldn't have been my dad, though, because who would take care of us?
Oh, my God.
Like she's processing, it looked like my dad. He didn't talk because he knew I would recognize his voice. But it couldn't be him because if it was him, I know what's going to happen to the person who killed my mom and who's going to take care of me and my brother.
Sure. Now, did she say where she witnessed all of this from? Where was she?
Kelley is running from her bedroom. Charlie is on a little tablet in her bed playing on this tablet when her mom runs in and slams the door. And she's trying to protect Charlie. And then she runs away from Charlie, and that's where she runs down the stairs. She hits the wall, she breaks the wall, and she ends up in the kitchen. So Charlie's in her room when all this happens, but she hears it happening. She hears the whole thing go down, and she goes down and actually sees Kelley.
She had to have been so frightened.
Oh, this interview is heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And I've got to give it to her. She is just recounting what she recalls as a 7-year-old girl who just witnessed her mother brutally being killed. Because of some of the issues with this interview. There's some of this that's never going to be used in court, obviously. However, the real mistake that was made, they think we've got probable cause. And they went and arrested Tom that morning, based largely on this interview.
Oh, dear.
They do not have, and they will not ever have, physical evidence to show Tom Clayton killed Kelley. In fact, there will be a lot of evidence that's going to come out that's going to clearly show Tom Clayton did not kill Kelley. He was not there.
Okay.
So to say that this case has some issues, I want to paint a picture of what has happened before I got involved to explain, like, okay, this case is really weak against Tom. Tom's going to bond out and he's going to be freed. They're going to do a lot of surveillance. They're going to do some tracking on him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, he finds the tracker on his car.
Oh.
Brings it in the police department. He's like, hey, guys, got your tracker. Good luck next time.
Oh, my gosh.
And there's some concerns that there is a lot of close friends in this community. And there is a link between the DA and the Millers. There is a link between the Millers and the Miller's daughter and Tom Clayton. And there's a link between Kelley and a lot of these people. And the problem I think that happens is they're all kind of running in the same circles. There's some really close friendships.
Oh.
And it appears that maybe some details of the investigation are getting leaked back to Tom Clayton.
So Tom Clayton has these wink, wink, close relationships
with people who may be having a close relationship with members of the prosecution or the investigation. Not New York State police officers, but some of the other locals in the area.
This is a sturdy little town, isn't it?
Yes. So the DA does the right thing by saying, we're all too close. Hey, Whedon, buddy, can you come over one county and help us out? I can't be part of this case. So he does the right thing and he's going to get out there. So now the DA has conflicted himself off the case. The case is stalling because there is no evidence against Tom. And they're trying to figure out, like, oh dear, what are we going to do here? Now, somebody comes forward, and it's very interesting who. It's Kelley's niece. And Kelley's niece, who's 16 at the time of her murder, spent the summer working for Tom at ServPro. So she kind of knows the family, has some interaction. Obviously, beyond just being related, she's close to Kelley and Tom.
Okay.
And just kind of out of the blue, she's going to come forward and say, hey, what about Michael Beard? He was working here. Just before Kelley's murder, Tom had fired him. Like maybe he had a grudge or something. Have you guys talked to Michael Beard? And law enforcement is thinking, okay, well, who's Michael Beard? So they start to do a little bit of a workup. And sure enough, Michael Beard was an employee of ServPro, and Tom had fired him about a little over a month before the murder.
Do we know why he was fired?
According to some rumors, he was drinking on the job, but that was never really substantiated. I don't think there's any paperwork. Like it wasn't a legit HR process, if
sure.
You know what I mean there.
Did the niece verify if that was true or anything?
She doesn't really give a lot of details other than saying, hey, maybe you guys should check into this Michael Beard guy. Now, here's a picture of Michael Beard. Now, obviously, he's already been arrested here. Law enforcement's going to make contact with him at his house the first time, and he denies any involvement, doesn't really know what they're talking about. Oh, by the way, I don't have a car. They live 20, 25 miles away. Like, I have no way to even get to the house.
Okay.
Out of a matter of procedure, they ask, hey, do you mind if we look at your cell phone? He's like, sure, no problem. And they actually do an extract. So they download all of the information on the cell phone.
Okay.
They cut him loose. Hey, thanks for talking.
Did they get call detail records?
They don't get call detail records, but they downloaded all of his connections.
So just a forensic extract.
Which is really good. God, you're so sexy when you're smart. Why would you get call detail records and download the phone?
Well, because sometimes the download doesn't show everything. If somebody's deleted history or something like that, you won't see that type of information in the device.
Yeah, 100%. That's where I was headed. You beat me to the punch there. So if you just are looking at the cell phone, I can delete phone calls. And regardless what anybody tells you, there are forensic tools out there that will not pick up the fact that I made 16 phone calls and I deleted 15 of them. So in this particular case, they're going to look at the downloads and they're going to be like, there's really nothing here. We're not too worried about it.
Right.
So they move on, and there's really not much going on. Now, there is one person, though, who looks at the extract and is like, I think there's more going on here. Allie Reagan. Remember Allie? Detective Reagan, who first called me and I hung up on, and then she suckered Keri into this case.
What made her think that there was more going on? What caught her eye?
She found evidence that certain things had been deleted. specifically had been deleted the night of the murder.
Oh.
So she's kind of saying, hey, we need to look at this guy. But she's just a girl. What does she know?
Yeah. Dumb girls.
Allie
this is what happens when you teach girls how to read.
Yeah, Allie was onto this so much earlier than everybody else, which is why I love her. She is a solid detective, and she was doing her work. However, the New York State Detective of the Year that year will not be a New York State detective. It's going to be Lucky Miller. Remember the Millers having the poker game?
Yes.
Well, Mrs. Miller, her first name is Lucky.
That's lucky, isn't it?
And she hosts poker games.
How fortunate she must be.
Lucky is going to come forward. This is months later, by the way.
Okay.
But Lucky's going to come forward, and she's really conflicted. She likes Tom. She considers Tom a close friend, and she's having a hard time wrapping her head around any possibility Tom could be involved in Kelley's death.
Okay.
But there's something that's bothering her from that night, and that is Tom asked her, can I borrow your phone? I need to make a quick call. My battery's dead. And she loaned him her phone.
Her cell phone or the house phone?
Her cell phone. He goes in the other room. She can hear him talking, but she can't make out what he's saying. So the important thing there is she knows he used the phone because she watched him go in the other room. She could hear some type of muffled conversation. He comes back and hands her the phone. So there's no doubt in her mind. He made a phone call. He talked to somebody.
Was this earlier in the evening, like at the start of the poker game or towards the middle, the end? When did he do this?
She knows it's around 10, 11 o'clock.
Okay.
We now know through records it was at 10:53, and I'm going to keep using that time, 10:53, because it's going to become very important.
Okay.
But yes, he makes a call on her phone at 10:53. So the more she's conflicted about this and thinking, that was really weird. He's never done that before. She finally can't help herself. And she's like, okay, who did he call? So she goes back on her phone. She goes through her records on her phone, and there's no call that night.
He had deleted it?
Well, she doesn't know why. And she's like, I was just really confused because I knew he made a call, but I couldn't find it. Mr. Miller's like, hey, Lucky, he can delete calls. He could have made the call and manually deleted it off of your record. She's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Off the device. So that's when he said, well, let's just look at your cell phone record. So they pulled up their monthly statement, if you will. They go through, and sure enough, at 10:53, there's an outgoing call from her phone that night.
She had to have had some butterflies in her stomach, like a pit of
At the end of the day, she just solved this case.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of work that has to be done, a lot of things that have to come together, but she's completely going to change this case because of her gut feeling. That's why I think she should get the New York State Detective of the Year for 2016. So they immediately call the Steuben County Sheriff's Office, who is the lead investigators on this, and they're like, hey, we just figured out who Clayton called that night at 10:53. Here's the phone number. So they put the number through a system. They look up the number really quick. Michael Beard.
Oh.
So now we have Tom borrowing somebody else's phone to call Michael Beard at 10:53 the night Kelley is killed.
Who he had terminated from his company. Why would you contact somebody that you've terminated at 10:53 at night?
More importantly, we have Lucky saying, well, he had to borrow my phone because he said his phone was dead.
Okay.
We've got Tom's phone records. His phone is not dead.
Did anybody else at the poker game see him using his phone after the 10:53 p.m. call?
There's actually a picture from that night with his phone on the poker table right in front of him.
And it was turned on?
It was turned on. We have the records and we have timing records. We can show throughout the entire night his phone never lost connection with the network.
At this point, do you know what kind of phone he had?
I don't recall. I can look it up again, but I don't recall. But he was active. In fact, he was. I think we saw some history. He was looking at some real estate. So throughout the night, from certain times, he was actually looking at some real estate listings. But the phone records show his phone registered to the network all night long. We're getting really good timing information throughout the entire game.
So he lied to Lucky.
He lied to Lucky.
You don't lie to Lucky.
Right. So now they're going to say, all right, we need to do a second interview with Beard. But this time we're going to do it at the police department. Now, Beard shows up at the police department with his wife. So investigators are like, well, let's interview both of them. Who knows? Maybe the wife knows something. So they start with Beard, and he's going to agree to take a polygraph test. And yes, polygraph tests are not admissible in court, but they're a great tool to try to gauge somebody's honesty and to use in an interview.
And to potentially elicit some information
Correct.
that would be helpful moving forward.
He will fail his polygraph miserably, like every aspect of it. But while they're giving him a polygraph in one room, a detective is interviewing the wife in another room.
Okay.
Do you remember there was a Chris Rock video from, I want to say like the mid to late 90s when they get pulled over by the cops.
But he got weed.
He got weed.
Yeah.
And
that happens all the time.
He
when
gets
you
beat
show
up by the
calls.
cops. Yeah. She's going to straight up, he got weed. So as this poor guy's in one room failing the polygraph, looking at the rest of his life in prison, his wife is in the other room saying, look, I don't know what's up. I know Tom Clayton owes us $10,000 because he told Michael, if you burn the house down, I'll pay you $10,000. And he never paid.
Oh.
So
Clayton got weed.
Yeah. So immediately the investigators are like, wait, what? And the wife explains very clearly there was an agreement between Michael Beard and Tom Clayton for Michael Beard to burn their house down and that he was going to pay him $10,000.
Did she say when all of this started occurring, these conversations?
Just before Kelley's killed.
Oh my gosh. Like
So-
within a week or something? How long?
Yeah, we'll get more into that. But
Okay.
yes, right around the time Kelley's killed.
All right.
So investigators go back into Michael's interview room with this information. It's like, hey, is the reason you killed Kelley Clayton because Tom Clayton was going to pay you $10,000? And he hangs his head. He knows the deal's up.
What had he been saying prior to this?
It wasn't me. Wasn't me. He went straight Shaggy
Wasn't me.
defense. Yeah.
Oh dear.
However, this is going to completely turn him. He's going to do a full confession, a full written confession. He's going to give details in that confession that nobody would know unless you committed this crime. And he's going to paint this picture that, yes, Tom Clayton told me he would pay me $10,000 to kill Kelley Clayton and then burn the house down. But the kids were supposed to be at her sister's house. They weren't supposed to be in the house. And they're saying, well, why would you do this? Like for $10,000, he's like, I needed the money. I was desperate.
Oh my
And we're going to
gosh.
talk about why he needs the money. So I wanted to paint the picture, first of all, early on. The kids are in the house, what Charlie witnesses, how that's going to impact her the rest of her life, right? So remember the kids. Now let's talk about the second thing. Beard was fired by Tom Clayton about a month and a half before the murders.
Mhm.
He's getting evicted. Can't afford his rent anymore. He's finding odd jobs, but he can't make his bills.
Did he give a reason as to why he was told he was terminated?
Not that I recall. I'm sure he did, but I don't recall. The more important thing, guess who his landlord is?
Clayton.
Clayton. So Tom fires him, knows he has no source of income, then basically serves eviction notice saying, hey, you're not paying your rent. You don't have a job. You're going to be evicted in 30 days. Creates this situation of dire straits where Beard is about to get thrown out of his house with his wife and kids because he's got kids. He's trying to pick up these side jobs. He can't do enough to catch up. He's in a terrible spot. But all of a sudden, the savior comes out and tells him, hey, I'll give you 10 grand if you help me out with this little
Super
situation.
manipulative.
Oh, you're getting to next level premeditated murder here, right? To set up a
Yes.
scenario, to put somebody in a situation. And we've said it before, anybody is capable of murder if you put him in the right situation. And he completely manipulated Beard into this position. It's terrible,
my
right?
gosh.
Just absolutely
Well,
terrible.
and to someone in Beard's position, $10,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh no, that saves. He
He
is
can-
living day to day.
Yeah,
That
he
saves
can
him
feed
for a
his-
couple months. That's a big deal.
Feed his kids. He can put shoes on their feet. Oh my gosh, this is sad.
Beard's not only done confessing by writing a confession, he's going to start taking them to evidence. So they get in the car. He points out a couple areas. They start to search the next morning. They're going to find the axe handle because he throws it out the window on the way back to Elmira. If you remember earlier, his first alibi was, I don't have a car. There's no way I can get to there and back. And he's right. He doesn't have a car. So Tom Clayton loaned him a car that night. So
Was it one of his own vehicles?
It was a vehicle that was at ServPro. It was left at ServPro for him with the keys in it.
Was it a company vehicle or like a rental? What kind of car was it? Do you know?
Private vehicle? And I think it's some type of vehicle that Clayton owns, but it's a private vehicle. It's not a company vehicle, but it's left in the ServPro lot.
Okay.
And the plan was Michael Beard would ride his bike from his house to ServPro, get in the truck, drive the truck, kill Kelley, burn the house down, drive the truck back, get back on his bike and ride home. Michael does this. And when he's riding his bike back home after he's killed Kelley,
Mm-hmm.
he forgot to take the keys out of his pocket for the truck. And now he's in full panic. So he throws these keys in a ditch that he rides by on his way home. He takes them to the ditch and says, yeah, they're in the water somewhere right there. They're going to recover the keys.
Oh my
He's also going to show him where there's this boggy, swampy marsh area where he dumped all of his clothes. They're going to find his clothes. His clothes have Kelley's blood on them. Here's a picture of them finding the axe handle. Notice the chip at the end of it there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's kind of a side by side. The one on the left has the evidence photo kind of showing the chip. The one on the right here is the actual piece of axe that was recovered from the kitchen. And you can see all the blood on it there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
This is the diver in the ditch that he threw the keys in, and they actually are going to recover the keys. So not only is Michael Beard providing all of these stories and confessions, they're recovering physical evidence that actually substantiate them. So it's legit. Michael's the real deal here. Beard's testimony against Tom Clayton should be enough now. They can tie all this together. They've got the physical evidence to show that it's honest and truthworthy, right? Like it's enough. It's changing the case. All right, we're going back after Tom. Tom is indicted again, and now Tom is going to go to trial as well.
Good.
Beard's trial is going to happen first. It's going to happen in October of 2016. They put him on the stand. He recants. Completely changes his statement.
Why?
I don't know what happened. I'm curious to this day if somebody got to him or offered him something to change his testimony and maybe offered him something to help his family, because Beard's done. Doesn't matter what Beard says. Beard's going to prison.
And he's never going to pay him.
Yeah, he's never going to get past this. So why would he want to save Tom Clayton, who set him up for all this?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to believe in the back of my head, maybe he was offered some type of thing that would help his family while he was in prison. But who knows? Maybe he just did it on his own. There's a million reasons why somebody could do that. But basically what he said, look, I was just going to burn the house down. That was my only job. And nobody was supposed to even be home. It was going to be an insurance claim. Like, this was never going to be a murder. And when I got there, I went in the house. I witnessed this other guy killing Kelley with the axe handle. And then this other guy, it freaked me out. I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? And he handed me the axe handle. And I thought, whoa, why do I have this axe handle? So he's standing in the house now. Kelley's dead. He's got the murder weapon in his hand. He panics and he runs. He throws the murder weapon out. He dumps all the stuff that he's supposed to dump. But this was never going to be a murder. He was only there to burn the house down. Somebody else killed Kelley. The problem is he's got DNA in the house in different places that don't match this story. The jury's not going to buy it. It's clearly a bullshit story. It doesn't match his confession. So the jury's going to see through it. He's found guilty.
Were they able to pull his prints off of the axe handle?
I don't think they ever got his prints off it because it'd just been out there in the weather.
Right.
But he led them to it. Like,
right.
It's almost even better. Mm-hmm. So he's going to get life in prison with no chance of parole. And great. They've got the guy who actually killed Kelley sentenced, right? Good stuff. But the case against Tom just blew up because no matter what you do, even if he recants and goes back to the first story, he's a liar now. Mm-hmm. Right? If you take him on his word of what he said here, he's never going to testify against Tom. Mm-hmm. So now there's all kinds of credibility issues with Michael Beard. They were heavily, heavily relying on Michael Beard's testimony to convict Tom Clayton.
Sure.
And that's gone. So it's mid-November. They've got trial January 9th. They're running out of time. So the prosecutor, a couple of the lead detectives, they drive up to meet with the FBI cast guys who are working the phone records. Mm-hmm. Give us something. Tell us there's something here. Show us the connections between Tom and Michael Beard that is going to help us put this case away. Like, what do you have, cast? And keep in mind, we're 60 days out from trial when this meeting's happening. And the meeting pretty much goes like, yeah, we don't have anything really. We've looked at all the records. There's really nothing significant in the phone records. They talk to each other, but we know they talk to each other. He worked for him. Like, there's normal conversations. So why would we be concerned about conversations? There's nothing on the 28th or 29th around the time of the murder. There's no reason for us to see any communications or travel patterns that in the records that are showing anything. There's some NELOS data from AT&T. Michael Beard's phone is AT&T. We have some NELOS data from Michael Beard's phone, but it really doesn't help us with much. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to testify to NELOS data. We've had issues in New York with NELOS data. We won't testify to it. Now, there's also some data from Fleetmatics. And what Fleetmatics is, it's a GPS tracking for fleet vehicles, and they have them on the ServPro vehicles. So sometimes Tom Clayton, when he's driving one of the ServPro vehicles, there's a tracker on that.
Sure.
We don't know anything about Fleetmatics. We're not going to testify to that either. And it doesn't help the case. We can't find anywhere where it's helping the case. So yeah, we really don't have any work product. There's really no links to show Tom's involvement. Sorry, guys, this is not a phone case.
So if it's not right up front, we just really don't do anything else much with it.
Yeah, if we have to work for it.
Homicides? We don't do homicides.
This puts the prosecution in a tailspin. They're losing this case. December 1st rolls around and they're thinking, what are we going to do? We don't have enough to prosecute. Now, the defense isn't going to budge on this. Hey, we've got a trial date. You guys don't have a case. Don't know what to tell you, but we're not continuing. We're going to trial. So they're pushing it. And this is what puts it into that panic mode of we've got to find somebody to look at these records. If there's anything here, we need a second opinion.
Now, did Thomas Clayton have a private defense attorney, or was he working with the public defender's office?
Private. He had a private attorney, Ray Slather. I might be mispronouncing this last name, Slather. We've talked about Ray before. We'll get to that in a little bit. So this is where they start calling different people. They get a hold of Keri Montano, who so graciously offers my services, yes. And here we are. Okay, so now we're going to transition. Now that everybody has a little bit of the history of where we're at when I get this call on December 26th, let's talk a little bit about the data that I was able to look at. So this is where I'm jumping in the timeline just a little bit. Mm-hmm. They have a ton of data, like a ton of data. I'm going to go through it. So for Thomas Clayton, they have all of his Verizon call detail records. We have over 4,500 locations within those records. So we have a really good sample to see his normal habits, his normal behaviors, his patterns, if you will. We also get his Fleetmatics, which is the GPS tracker on his ServPro vehicle. There's 300 plus locations in that. Michael Beard, we get his AT&T call detail records. Michael Beard's very active on AT&T, over 16,000 locations in that report. The Nilos records, which is an estimated GPS, sometimes they can be way off.
It's not called Nilos anymore.
Yeah, it's Locabor now, but back then it was Nilos, and it's 14,000 locations there. And then when we go into Google, Michael Beard had an Android. So Tom Clayton had an iPhone. I do know he has an iPhone, but I don't know what version. Michael Beard had an Android, which means we're going to get Google data. 32,000 locations from Google.
Oh my gosh.
When you put all this together, we have over 67,000 data points for Michael Beard and Tom Clayton. There's a ton of data here.
Yes. That is a lot to look at.
And then there's more. We have the extracts from both of their phones. This doesn't always happen in cases, especially homicide cases. Mm-hmm. But we have cell phone extracts from Tom Clayton, from Kelley Clayton, and from Michael Beard. So we actually have text message content in this case, which we don't typically get.
Interesting.
We've got the full Celebrite dumps, so the physical extract, the downloads from the phones. And then we actually even have some surveillance video from around ServPro watching a truck come and go the night that she's killed. Now, at this point, which just blew me away, I was never provided a work product where anybody had taken the time to actually map, document, create any type of work product correlating all of these data sources.
I'm really surprised this blew you away.
Thanks, babe. And I want to clear something up here. I am not some kind of a freak Rain Man person where I look at 67,000 data points and I point to it like, oh, there's the smoking gun. We actually created a class out of this case that I used for years after this case to show people, hey, here's the process. Follow the methodology. What do you see? Mm-hmm. And every single class saw the same thing I did. So I want to really emphasize, this is not Cy having some special skill to see something that others missed. It's Cy using a methodology that works.
Well, I think it's important to point out that the methodology includes the mapping system and process that you use that can create really dynamic visuals and understandings of a lot of data. It's not static mapping where you have to look at one call at a time. You just can't do that with this much data.
Yeah, the data is huge here. And the other thing is, if you are looking for evidence on September 29th, the morning she's killed, you're not going to find much. If you don't know anything about September 29th and you just look at the records to see what the records say, you're going to find a lot. Mm-hmm. So where the primary mistake was made in this case is there was a lot of focus on September 28th, September 29th. And if you don't know what you're looking at and you don't look at the whole records, there's nothing there. So right. The FBI wasn't wrong that, hey, there's nothing there, but they were looking at this little tiny bit of data and they weren't looking at the big picture.
There wasn't a thorough investigation of all of the data.
They weren't following best practices.
And if you had all of that data, why wouldn't you look at it? If you weren't concerned about it, why wouldn't you just get the night of the crime?
Because Tom Clayton now has had time to prepare for trial, he has come up for a reason why he borrowed the phone. My phone was dead, so I had to borrow Lucky's phone. Yes, I did call Michael Beard because I was going to go deer hunting, and Michael Beard was trying to make extra money because he had lost his job. I felt bad for him. He was going to go set up a deer blind, a little blind to hide behind for deer hunting for me, and I was going to pay him a little extra, like his little side job for him, and I was calling him, letting him know about the deer blind because I was going to go deer hunting.
Did Michael Beard know about this?
No, of course not.
Deer blind?
Yeah, okay. Of course not. But it doesn't matter. Michael Beard can't get on the stand because he's a liar.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. Errors are made when timelines are focused on. And what I mean by that is I look at the 29th, I'm going to make an error. So in this case, I told investigators, I don't want to know the details of your case. Just send me the records. I will look at all the records. Like you were saying earlier, I'm going to process them in a timeline where I can just sit there and stare at it. Let me see what I find and we'll go from there. Now, I'm going to segue just a little bit here because I am going to call this guy out.
By the way, you are going to look at all of the records together. And when we say all of the records, you're going to look at Beard's together, you're going to look at Clayton's together, as well as looking at Kelley Clayton's.
Yeah, you have to map everything, put it all together and see what it says. Now, we're pretty good about sometimes I don't mention names, sometimes I do mention names, sometimes we play clips, sometimes we don't. Mm-hmm. Bill Easton. I'm going to mention this name.
Okay.
He was one of the defense attorneys on this case, and he wasn't even a real defense attorney. He's like the second chair guy. He never said anything in court. He never cross-examines me. I have no contact with this fool ever.
He just sits there and takes notes?
I don't know what he did, but he wasn't the defense attorney that examined me. He wasn't the defense attorney I dealt with on cross-examination. I don't know who this guy is other than he's at some point had something to do with Thomas Clayton.
Okay.
ABC 2020, I said earlier, had done a episode on this called The Man Behind the Mask. And I'm going to play a clip from ABC 2020, The Man Behind the Mask, of Bill Easton talking about my testimony on this case.
Oh.
And I want to lay this thing, we keep doing this. Don't trust me. Let me show you.
Okay.
So I want to show what the defense is saying, and then I want to actually show our socialites what's actually happening.
Let's see this.
There was no evidence as to the content of those calls, and soirees' testimony was skewed in trying to make much more of those calls.
It's a pattern that clearly
This is Weed and Wetmore, so this is the actual prosecutor.
Thomas Clayton did this together.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Easton really wanted to put his opinion out there.
Yeah, so let's talk about the content of these calls that allegedly I skewed. So let's look at the methodology visually. And sorry for those of you listening on audio, this is where you're going to really want to see the YouTube side of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play what it looks like when we map all those records and we just watch them over a period of time. So what you see on the map here is I've got a big arrow that marks the scene, and the end of the arrow where it's pointing is where the Claytons live. And we're going to start with just Beard, and all that information that you see kind of to the east of that arrow is showing his connections through AT&T's network. Some of them we have sector information, some of it's the NELOS, so the yellow circles is the NELOS. The blue overlays are when he's connected to a tower for calls or data. And I'm playing about a month's worth of time. And I'm going to play this a couple of times. And you can see he primarily stays off to the right side of the screen there. That's Elmira. That's where he works. That's where he lives. His primary locations. And I'm going to play it all the way through, and then I'm going to reset it, and I'll play it again. And here we go. We're going to start playing it again. And what I want to focus on here is there's going to be a couple of times that you're going to see all that activity that's typically in Elmira move over closer to the crime scene. Like that one's hard to miss.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't take some special training to say, hey, that was interesting.
Right.
And if you keep watching, you're going to see another smaller version of that pop up.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how much time frame are you looking at on the screen here? What's your...
About a month.
Okay.
I'm doing about a 30-day period. Most of the month of September. I think I might have started like late August.
Okay.
So roughly a month worth of time. Now it's going to play through one more time. So I'm actually going to do this 3 times. And this third time, I'm going to pause it. So I can show little screenshots of where the anomalies jump off. So when I'm saying, hey, we look at these records for anomalies, I don't want it to seem like a mystery that only certain people can do. It's obvious. 9:21 at noon. This tells me Beard's phone is doing something it doesn't normally do. You can't miss it, right?
Right.
And if we hit the play button again and we keep going through, we're going to see another one pop up over here. And the one that gets me on this one, although it's not as significant as that last one with the amount of data, it's the time, 9:24 at 1:20 a.m. Why is Michael Beard all of a sudden out by the Clayton residence at 1 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
And he sends a text message, which we're going to get into here in a little bit. I don't know any details about this case. So I think clearly she was killed on the 24th. How did they not see this? How does everybody not know? Like, he's there. So I call him back. I'm all excited. I call the prosecutor. There's some of the investigators in the room, and I'm explaining, all right, I looked at the records. Hey, I think there might have been some pre-planning on the 21st. We need to dig into the 21st for sure to find out why he was out in that area. And on the 24th is probably when your murder went down. I don't know in details of the case, but I would say it happened on the 24th. The back of the room, I don't know who it was. She was killed on the 29th, Turbo. They actually called me Turbo, which was kind of funny. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's even more interesting to me because we don't see anything on the 28th and 29th. But I'm here to tell you guys, your investigation needs to focus on 9/21 and 9/24 because that's when things are happening on this case. So let's break down the 21st a little bit further. And now that we started with this, we can actually add Tom Clayton's records in. So Tom Clayton is going to be red. Michael Beard is going to be blue. We have some text messages here between Kelley and Tom. And ultimately what's happening is Tom is asking, hey, are you going to be home? Do you want to meet for lunch? And she says, yeah, I'm going to go to my workout. But then after my workout, we can meet in Corning. Probably around 1. We can meet at Wegg's, which is a little supermarket there. Tom is texting her to find out she's not home. Right after these messages start happening where she's saying she's gone, we see Michael Beard's phone move out towards the Clayton residence. We're going to see that Tom Clayton's phone is with him. So we have Michael Beard and Tom Clayton leaving Elmira, driving out to Clayton right after this conversation with Kelley to make sure she's not home.
He never wants her to see Beard at the house.
And Beard had been at the house before, but not at this particular time.
He's scouting the house with Beard.
He is. And on the way back, he makes a phone call. And if my theory is correct that they're planning the murder and Tom Clayton in the middle of that planning is going to make a phone call, that's a big deal. Like we're not talking about, hey, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? So Tom is going to make an outgoing call to Matthew Lunger. This is where those patterns come in. It's so important to understand. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this backwards and say, okay, well, how many times has Tom Clayton called Lunger? How often is it that these two are talking? And it's not often.
Who is this guy?
Good question. He is another business person in Elmira. I think it's a glass shop. Like, I don't know what type of glass, but he sells glass. So I call the investigators. Hey, have you guys talked to Matthew Lunger? One of the investigators is like, I know that guy. I went to high school with him. He's a good dude. Like, he's not involved. I said, I'm not saying he's involved, but he talked to Tom Clayton in the afternoon, just afternoon, on September 21st. Michael Beard was with Tom Clayton when he called him. Go interview him. I don't know what his involvement is, but that's an interview. Find out what's going on there. They call me back about an hour later. Oh my God, dude, you're not going to believe this.
Oh dear.
Matthew Lunger totally remembers that call because it was really weird. Well, what did he say? He said Tom Clayton called him and asked him if he needed any help in the shop because he had a former employee that was looking for work. This guy needs a job. Like, can you hire him? Like, what's going on? And Matthew's like, I might have some work to do. And Tom says, great. He's with me right now. We'll swing by. And
don't worry. He's a great guy. I only fired him for drinking on the job.
Which makes no sense, right? But Tom takes Michael Beard to Matt Lunger's shop, drops him off. Matt Lunger meets Michael Beard through Tom Clayton that afternoon. So it proves that they're together. But also remember this manipulation. Hey, buddy, let me help you find another job.
Right. You help me, I help you.
Right. So now we can put Tom Clayton, Michael Beard together on the 21st, driving out to the house, and then driving back, and then Tom doing a favor for Michael Beard. It's a big deal. Now, I want to go back to Mr. Easton's comments when we started about my testimony on the content of these phone calls. There's nothing about the content of the phone calls on this evidence. This is just good follow-up and good interview tactics is all we're talking here. Let's look at the 24th. This gets even better. So now I look at the 24th and I see, okay, he's out there around 1 to 2 a.m. and something interesting happens here. And this is really important for our socialites to understand just what type of depraved asshole we're dealing with here. And I'm going to really hammer this home in a little bit.
Are you talking about Beard or Clayton? Just
watch through. You always jump to the end. So here's where he gets out there. And why would Michael Beard connect his phone while he's at the crime scene? And he connects it to send a text message to Tom Clayton to say, when you can, call me.
Okay.
Now, Tom Clayton is in Cincinnati. He's at a conference. What a great alibi.
Yes, he's so far away.
He is out of the state, and all of a sudden at 1:30 in the morning, Michael Beard sends him a text message. By the way, we had 6 months worth of records. He's never done this before, not at 1 o'clock in the morning.
How often is Clayton in Cincinnati?
Very rare. Not very often either. This was the perfect storm for him to have a great alibi being outside of the state. Michael Beard clearly goes out to that area.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was an attempt to kill Kelley. So
The
now,
first attempt.
The first attempt. So now I'm thinking, okay, it may have happened on the 29th, but it was meant for the 24th. What did Michael Beard do leading up to this? What other things in his phone records can I extrapolate, if you will, to find out, like, okay, what is going on here? So if I back up those records and I really focus on that afternoon of the 24th, he goes down to Wellsburg, which is just south of Elmira.
Okay.
And he's with a friend, and I can see this in text messages to his wife. The friend's name is Cato.
Okay.
Now, there's a first rule in the detective handbook. Anytime you get a witness named Cato, he's a suspect.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember the OJ case.
Yes, it is an interesting name.
Yeah, but Cato should always be assumed a suspect until proven otherwise. So as soon as I see Cato's name, I'm like, oh, this isn't good. When I start looking at the text between Beard's wife and Beard, he explains that he's doing this job down in Wells with his friend Cato. Oh, hey, we're going to be late. Cato's going to drop me off later on. Just letting you know we're going to be late. When they leave Wells, it appears they leave Wells around the time to go out to Thomas Clayton's.
And Cato was with him.
It appears to me Cato was probably with him.
Did anybody interview Cato?
Cato's never been interviewed. So I call the investigators back. I'm like, hey, have you guys talked to Cato? No, we know who he is, but he had nothing to say.
We knew him in high school. He's a good guy.
Yeah, it's just Cato. He's just one of these guys around here. I'm like, all right, listen, go interview Cato and get into him. Go with the old, we know what you know. Like, let's talk.
Yeah.
So they go and they bring Cato in and they start doing an interview. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting, like, whoa, what is he saying? What is he saying? And I can't wait anymore. So I call one of the detectives and he's like, hey, we've got him in the interview room right now. Let me call you back. Oh my God. And he hangs up.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, Cato's dropping the bomb. So here's Cato's story. Yes, I was with him in Wells. We were doing this job. Yes, we did drive to Thomas Clayton's house that night. It was the weirdest thing. Michael Beard was driving. We parked a couple houses down. Michael Beard got out of the truck. He had this Crown Royal bag with him. Second rule in the detective handbook, if you see a Crown Royal bag in a search warrant or a shady person carrying a Crown Royal bag, that's where the paraphernalia or the dangerous drugs or the weapon is 100% of the time.
A little purple velvet bag.
Yes. So he gets out and he's like, hey, I'll be right back. Now, Michael Beard has told Cato at this point, Tom Clayton thinks that Kelley Clayton is having an affair on him. And he just wants me to check and see if there's anybody else here. So just hang out. I'll be right back. So Michael Beard just disappears into the darkness for a little bit. Short time later, he comes running back to the truck. Complete panic. They peel out. They drive back to Elmira. And he's just completely beside himself. And Cato's like, dude, what's up? Let me tell you. The kids are there. The kids were there. I almost killed the kids.
He said this to Cato.
He was going to kill Kelley and burn the house down that night.
And Cato never called the police?
But when he goes upstairs, the kids' doors are open and he sees the kids are home. And he's like, whoa. I ain't killing kids. And he left. And this is when he sends Tom the text message. Call me. Like, what the fuck? The kids are home.
Did Tom intend then to have the children killed as well?
At least on the first attempt, because the plan was in place. Now, let me throw another curveball at you. Let's just say hypothetically, I know you would never do this.
Okay.
You're going to have me killed. And my kids.
Oh,
and
dear.
you're on a trip. And you know it's going down that night. Like you've planned it. You've taken the hitman to our house. You've shown him the house. And you're just waiting. All right. This is the last night they're ever going to be around. I got a new life coming.
Sure.
The hitman sends you a text at 1:30 in the morning. Call me. What do you do?
Something's wrong. I call.
He never calls. He doesn't call until like 7:30, 8 o'clock the next morning. He doesn't give a shit. He is sleeping like a baby in another state, knowing that when he wakes up that morning, his family is probably going to be dead. In fact, he ends his text messages with Kelley about whether she was able to get both of the kids down and asleep that night.
Oh my gosh. He's free and clear from all the responsibilities that mean something in his life.
Correct. And he doesn't even respond to the text message.
Oh my gosh.
So Cato drops all of this, which just corroborates the story even further. This is going to completely change the direction of the investigation, obviously.
Oh my gosh. And he never, ever hit up Beard in a text message or conversation that Beard mentioned that said the kids aren't supposed to be there.
That was a communication just between the two of them when they went out there on the 21st. But when Beard sees the kids, he was like, no, the kids are supposed to be at the sisters. The kids aren't supposed to be there. I'm not doing this. And that's why he left. He was supposed to kill her and burn the house down on the 24th.
Oh,
but he sees the kids and he's like, no, I'm out. I ain't doing this.
Okay, so he showed some morality.
On that night.
On
Correct.
that night.
Now, we know that Tom Clayton tried to hide or conceal the phone call to Michael Beard while he's playing poker at Lucky Miller's house.
Sure.
How many times has he done this? How many other times has he tried to hide communications? We have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to walk our socialites through exactly where we see this type of data, because I have a defense attorney saying I'm making way more out of the content of these calls than was ever there. Well, I'm not going to talk about content, but let me walk you through some of this process. So I want to look at Michael Beard's phone records, and I'm going to show them on the screen here. And I want to see, hey, is there any weird outgoing one-time calls? This person's never called Michael Beard before, is never going to call him again. And sure enough, just 12 hours before Kelley is killed, there is a call from M&M Auto to Michael Beard. M&M Auto's never called Michael Beard before. He's never called them.
Right.
So if we go back to the map now and we look at what we have here, I've got multiple sources of data we're going to talk about. This first one is a Fleetmatics tracker. And this is the GPS on Tom Clayton's work car. So there's a white logo, gray dots around it, and then a blue dot in the center.
Okay.
Anytime you see that, that is Tom Clayton's car from the Fleetmatics. He starts his car at 12 o'clock to go to work. And when he started his car, it registered that location we just saw at his house.
Okay.
We have Michael Beard's information. So we can see Michael Beard is at home. So at 11:59 and 59 seconds, we get a Google location showing him in the general area of his house. So he's in or around his house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as Tom Clayton goes to leave for work, we're going to see both the Fleetmatics and the Verizon data. So we have two different sources of data, and you can kind of see the corroboration. Some of the Verizon's off because it's the timing estimations, and if you don't look at it right, it just doesn't quite look right.
Sure.
But ultimately, as Tom leaves his house and goes into Corning, he's going to stop. Any idea where he pulls over? At 12:08?
The auto place.
M&M Auto. So we have Tom driving into the parking lot. It's 3-meter accuracy with Fleetmatics. He parks his car at M&M Auto at 12:08. At 12:09, there's an outgoing call from M&M Auto to Michael Beard. I wonder who made that call.
Clayton.
And they're going to go interview M&M Auto. M&M Auto knows Tom Clayton well, and yeah, he did swing by that day and use the phone.
Was his phone dead that day too?
Probably so. But still, shady.
That is shady.
And basically, this is the call. Hey, I'm going on the poker game tonight. We're going to try this again. The kids are going to be at the sister's house. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine.
Your life will be easier with your $10,000.
Right. So again, this is data that was missed in the initial investigation. And it has nothing to do with content or anything else. It's just looking at all of the data holistically and coming up with what's happening. So when we go back to this schmuck.
There was no evidence as to the content of those calls. And soirees' testimony was skewed in trying to make much more of those calls.
So,
Oh, Bill.
yeah. Oh, Bill. The evidence is stacking up. Now we have a case. I think we're going to be all right in trial. Beard and Clayton clearly visited the scene on the 21st. We can show that without a doubt. Now we have an extra witness that can corroborate that who has no dog in the fight. Very reliable. Then we have Cato. It's probably a little shady, but at the same time, he's dropping information that's consistent to the evidence. The M&M Auto call, that's a big deal. That's the second time on the same day Tom is trying to conceal his calls. Obviously, Lucky Miller is going to testify about the hidden call from the poker game. And then we've got all the physical evidence with Beard. It is starting to look very much like Tom Clayton did hire Michael Beard, and we can prove that in court now. The other thing we haven't gotten into, there's a ton of information coming out. Tom is not monogamous at all.
He's not very loyal to his spouse.
No, he is not. And I have a theory on the motive that I don't ever think fully came out, and I don't want to get into it today. And looking at all of the records that I've looked at, I think I know the motive. And I think it does have a lot to do with Tom having extramarital affairs, wanting to be beyond his family, if you will, wanting to be rid of the family. And anybody watching, I think I know, and I probably know what you know that you don't want other people to know, and I don't want to get too far into it because I'm not 100% on this, but I feel very comfortable. Tom was having an affair in such a manner that was probably illegal, and he could have gone to prison for a really long time, and I think Kelley had figured it out.
Illegal as in someone underage?
Possibly, yeah. And that's a problem, especially if your wife knows.
Yes.
That, I believe, is the true motive behind this case. Now, my skewed testimony wasn't so skewed, obviously. I think at first that was the defense's plan is, the soirees. He's going to talk about a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Well, I get on the stand and all of a sudden I'm making headway big time.
Right.
So now...
Well, I don't think defense attorneys and prosecutors are used to phone records making sense.
Yeah. And in this case, they had been told that there's nothing there, right? So I think the defense wasn't expecting too much. And then all of a sudden, this changes everything.
Yeah.
So they have to change their tactic. What are they going to change their tactic to? Well, he doesn't have an associate's degree. He lied. And this is the case where the defense actually on the stand accused me of lying about my prestigious associate's degree.
And we talked about this case in Clown Shoes.
Yeah, they had to go get it and it came back in. Well, now my associate's degree comes in. So now the jury's like, okay, well, the phone stuff made sense. He didn't lie about his prestigious associate's degree. What now, defense? And they're like, well, his wife is smart and beautiful.
That was never said.
Yeah, it was one of the defenses.
I do remember this defense attorney keeping you on the stand for so long. It was getting ridiculous because I was envisioning this case going into the next week when we had a 40-hour class. We were super strapped for money, and if that class was canceled, we were screwed. So I remember putting
I think
a lot of
testimony
pressure.
Was 3 or 4 days worth of testimony. It got pretty heated a couple times, and Ray Slather, who was the defense attorney, he didn't understand the phone records well at all, so he would go off on these wild tangents. And I was getting frustrated, and I'm trying to be very professional, and I shouldn't have said this, but at one point in my frustration, and I said it politely, but it still probably came off a little jerkish, is... Mr. Slather, you don't know what you're talking about. You said you have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. And he turns around and walks back towards the little podium. And he's upset. And he's like, oh, yes, I do. And one of the jurors actually said out loud, no, you don't. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, I shouldn't have said that. And the problem is we're borderline mistrial, right?
There was actually a reporter who reported that in a newspaper. It was documented.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because even the jury now is calling out the defense attorney publicly in the trial. It's an issue. Drive test. I know we're going long, but this is really important. We got to come back to this. Remember, the FBI never did a drive test on this. We did it late. It's probably not going to come in. In fact, not only is it not going to come in, it didn't, right? The prosecution made the decision. It's too late. We're not even going to go down that road. Yeah. The defense is about to make another huge error. And, this doesn't happen very often. Mm-hmm. I did the drive test in the event someone throws me a softball. You got Babe Ruth at the plate. You don't throw him an underhanded softball pitch, but I was going to be ready just in case they did. Well, Ray Slather, here comes the softball pitch. This error is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen by a defense while I was testifying. So he puts this image up that's on the screen right now. And essentially what we're looking at is 10 minutes worth of data for Michael Beard. And what happens is there's this really weird place in New York that you're kind of going through this mountain pass and you come up on top of a mountain and you have line of sight to a big area. If you have your phone in that area and you're in that general area for about 10 minutes, you're going to connect to 5 different cell sites and they're miles and miles and miles apart from each other.
But you're up high, so you could very easily have
line of sight.
Direct line of sight.
But the jury doesn't know this.
Right.
So on my cross-examination, Ray Slather is going to show the jury this exhibit right here, which shows all these different cell towers that Michael Beard's phone connects to in this 10-minute period, and they are miles apart. So which
makes you very giddy.
Oh, yeah, I know where he's going. I'm like, oh, please open this door. And sure enough, he does. So he's going to actually just go at me for a little while, and he's going to plan this next one. And he says, well, that Google Earth that you're using to testify, because I had my computer up on the stand. Mm-hmm. He's like, can you tell me how far it is from cell site 1 to cell site 2? And I'm like, 26 miles. Okay, how about cell site 2 to cell site 3? 32 miles. Cell site 3 to 4, you get the idea. He has me all these, and it's miles and miles and miles. And he would say, well, would you agree that there's no way to travel 30 miles in 10 minutes? Yeah, I absolutely would. You would agree you couldn't travel 50 miles in 10 minutes. I would totally agree with you. So there is no way you can explain how Michael Beard connects to all of these cell towers, which are miles and miles apart within a 10-minute window. Well, yes, actually I can. How can you do that? Because I did a drive test, and all of a sudden the drive test that was never going to come in is coming in. I'm going to show the drive test. He opened the door to it. He opened the door. So I'm going to play this one a couple times just so we can go through it. What you're seeing here is the actual results from the drive test. So the blue hexagons that are traveling, you see them moving. That's the actual equipment itself. And as we drive, you're seeing lines in green and yellow that are being drawn back to cell towers. Maybe describe a little bit about the green and yellow lines and what that means as it relates to connectivity. So green is your best signal. Yellow is your second best signal. And if I play this one again here, let me set this up. And as we start to watch it, you can see all the interaction. Now, here in a minute, you're going to see a gap, though, where there are no lines. It just, everything disappears for a little bit. That's because it's a dead zone. And then when it comes back on, all of a sudden, okay, we're back in connection. Now, if you look right there, we're connected to 4 of those 5 cell sites. Mm-hmm. If you travel a little bit to the east, you'll connect to that 5th one. What we found is there's only one place in all of New York that you can create the records that we saw on the 21st from Michael Beard's phone. And it has to be on the top of this mountain as you go over the mountain to go to the Clayton residence. It's the only place you're going to be able to do that. Mr. Slather, this is what happens when you have no idea what you're talking about. Correct. So the jury is actually going to see this. And I'm going to get testimony in that I can't say on the 21st that Michael Beard's phone was at the Clayton residence, but I can say it's consistent to being in the immediate area of the Clayton residence, because that's the only place you can essentially recreate what we're seeing in the records. Sure. So that goes over really well. Jury's going to come back guilty. He is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Great. He's launched multiple appeals. I think he's probably bled his family dry of any money that they're ever going to have on his appeal process. Mm-hmm. He's lost every one of them. It's gone all the way up to the New York Supreme Court and been turned down on every step of the way. Wow. So it doesn't look like Tom Clayton is going anywhere anytime soon. And I do want to make sure to paint that picture. This guy manipulated Michael Beard into a crisis in his life to exploit him, to take money, to do something completely out of his character. Michael Beard freaks out the first time because he's like, look, I'm not killing kids. Mm-hmm. And then the second time doesn't realize the kids are there, goes through with it. Who knows if he would have burned down the house. Luckily, he got scared at the end and just left, probably because he saw Charlie. The other thing that's really disturbing, Tom Clayton had been telling people at work that he comes home and Kelley paints her toenails and fingernails by the bathtub in their bathroom, which is framed out in this pine shiplap wood siding, and she burns candles. So he'll come home and there's all these cotton balls with like fingernail polish remover and candles next to this wood paneling. She's going to burn the house down. She's flammable. He has literally already started to lay the foundation that one of these days she's going to burn the house down. Like, this guy is a terrible piece of shit. He needs to spend the rest of his life in prison. His intention was to kill Kelley and the kids. Luckily, the kids lived. Wow. But pretty crazy. And with the beating like that, if the house would have burned, would they have ever figured out the homicide? Because there's so much evidence that's lost there. Right. You may not even be able to show how she was killed. So kind of interesting. Remember when I said there's only a few FBI members that would do something like this? I have a lot of respect for the FBI. I have a lot of respect for a lot of the people on the FBI cast team. There are a handful, though, that... So after the trial, the FBI agent that was involved earlier in this case, that had some interactions somewhat, goes to the prosecutor and he's like, hey, I need soirees transcripts. We need everything he testified to. The prosecutor's taken back a little bit and thinking, well, why do you need his transcripts? Well, he's doing defense work. We've got some cases coming up where he's testifying for the defense, and we need to prep for him. Was this the half-wit that sent me that very presumptuous email when I was working with a large agency in Georgia? No, I'm not going to name him, but you're talking about the Grand Poobah. He's kind of the Grand Poobah of the cast team. He had a lot to do with the initial organization of it. This is one of his underlings that is in the New York area. But the Grand Poobah was kind of involved in that whole thing. And yeah, they were trying to get my testimony because they had looked at the records. They didn't see all of this. They didn't know how I saw it. And now they look bad. But the problem is they spun it. Instead of just saying that, or maybe coming to a class, they spin it into, oh no, he's doing all this defense work. Instead of trying to get their shit together in a real way,
They're doing it in a very underhanded way.
Yeah, but the real underhanded thing here is I wasn't doing defense work.
No.
I've done one defense case in my entire life, and it's going to happen 7 years after this case. So it wasn't that they just did it, but they intentionally made up this bullshit story to do it. And that's why I do have issues with the fact that they represented themselves in this case as the go-to experts. They clearly failed on delivering a work product that was significant to the case. And then when they realized that they failed, instead of seeking out how to fix it or how to do better or go about it, they do this underhanded, well, let's study his transcripts and we'll accuse that we have to do that because of all the defense work that he's done.
And we'll lie and say that he only testifies for defense.
Yeah. And it has rubbed me wrong since. And now I will say this is the old school cast team. Most of them have retired and phased out. In fact, they started this company that now does expert testimony.
Yeah.
In fact, they advertise if you have a case with our mapping system, they'll come in and help you.
They speak poorly about ZedX, which ZedX doesn't even exist anymore. It's under LexisNexis. So.
Well, they did come in on a case for the defense to help with all the ZedX issues.
Yes.
They lost.
Before you ever even testified for a defense case.
Yeah.
They testified to a defense first.
Anybody wants to look that case up, Tory White, United States versus Tory White.
Mm-hmm.
It was Pennsylvania.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Pennsylvania.
They were a pompous bunch, weren't they?
Yeah, they lost bad on that case. So anyway, that is an example of why we should probably be a little bit more open to look at how methodologies are done and look at things a little bit more holistically. I can learn a ton of stuff from the FBI cast team. The FBI cast team can learn a ton of stuff from me. Yeah. And if we all just put our egos aside and actually do what's right, we can probably do some really good things out there. And we have in the past. So hopefully that clears some of those issues up.
Well, yeah. And not to mention, continue with technology as it advances and progresses. You have to have dynamic technology in order to look at a lot of the data that you do.
All right. So next week, we have a new thing that's coming. Yeah. What are you doing next week?
Next week is Socialite Scants.
What's a scant?
It's very stingy amounts of information basically being given to people. I know people want longer episodes and more episodes weekly, but we're going to come up with Socialite Scants, and we're going to give you little short stories of just fun cases that we've worked that don't take a whole lot of time to explain. It's just a fun episode. It keeps things light. We've had a lot of heavy cases recently, so we're going to bring you something a little bit more fun. Join us next week, Socialites, for Socialite Scants. Have a great week and stay safe.
This guy takes stalking to a whole other level. He had broken into her house with baby monitors in hand, and he hid baby monitors all over the house. Like he pulled the couch away from the wall, cut a hole in the back of the couch, stuck a baby monitor and plugged it in, pushed the couch back.
So you can monitor what she was doing.
So he could park down the street with the receiving end of the baby monitors, and he could listen to everything she was doing.
Oh, freak.